Excellent. What time are we at? Is it 1:30? 1:30. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alastair McAlpine. You can call me Ali. You can also call me Roger if you want, but he's not here. Unfortunately, Roger was the Chief Statistician of Scotland until 3 weeks ago when I took over the post. Roger has gone on to take on charge an organisation called Research Data Scotland that I'm going to tell you about in a second. He was still going to come across here, and don't make me come here in my third week in the job, but unfortunately he tested positive with COVID. So if Roger is online and he can hear this, and we wish him all the best, I hope he's making a speedy recovery. He's very disappointed he couldn't make it here today, and I'm very enthusiastic about coming and meeting everybody. So thank you, and bear with me while I give my presentation. So always a good opportunity to apologise for your presentation before you start, but I didn't write it. I think we'll just welcome anybody that is online. So there are people who are joining us online, I believe. I have to ask everybody, if you're online, make sure you're on mute, otherwise we might be able to hear you muttering, especially when my bad presentation goes really poorly, so please do mute yourself. We will be recording this as well and putting it on YouTube. Great. So we've just joined after lunch, and this is, I suppose, the graveyard shift, because everybody's now very warm, very full. So if you suddenly hear me talking loudly, that's because about a quarter of you have fallen asleep. If I start clapping, it's about half of you have gone to sleep. And if I just shut up altogether, it's because you've all gone to sleep. So we'll just see how it goes. I'll introduce my colleagues in a second that are going to be coming up to present. We have Johan Van der Valk from Statistics Netherlands. And we have Bart Delbeke from Statistics Flanders, and then Lisa van der Landschoot, I hope I pronounced that right, from Statistics Flanders as well. We'll do a half-hour presentation, and then we'll hopefully have a few minutes of questions and answers at the end of each presentation. Shouldn't take more than 25 minutes. So, first of all, I'll just say what, oh, there we go. So I am a bit nervous, so please bear with me, because I have had to come up to speed on these slides. I have tried to tailor them a wee bit to tell a story that I'm more confident about telling. But what I would say is that it's quite an exciting time in Scotland at the moment for statistics, for what we're trying to do. I think we are starting to see the emergence of a lot of structures come into place that is going to help us propel the statistics onto the next level. And under my own leadership, I hope to be able to empower statisticians to make more use of data science and some of the data science techniques that we've been developing. I'll come on and speak to that at the end. But my predecessor, Roger, has spent a good 10, 11 years of his career trying to get administrative data better used and get access to that regionally across the UK. And I think he has made some fantastic gains in this area. But the reason why he's gone off to develop Research Data Scotland is so that they can empower that to happen even more. He would be able to talk much more confidently about what I'm about to tell you today. But it has to be said that a lot of the infrastructure has been put in at the ground level. And it was interesting when I was listening to Roland talk earlier on. Please come in. I don't bite hard. The problems that you are facing and the problems that I'm hearing that people face across Europe are the same. It's about data protection. It's about legality. It's about harmonization of the data. These are not unique, and I hope that today we'll be able to talk much more in the future about how we address some of these problems. Just to compare Scotland, so we're about half of Belgium in population size. I was actually looking at area size. We're about 2.5 times the size of Belgium, which makes us quite sparsely populated in comparison. Scotland's divided up into, this is a generalisation, but Scotland is divided up into two parts, really. One is the central belt of Scotland, where there's a lot of industrialisation, a lot of population density. That's generally between Edinburgh and Glasgow, moving up to Dundee on the east coast. And then you've got the islands, the north of Scotland and southern Scotland, which is much more rural in its population. And that comes with different challenges. And when I talk to colleagues across the border in England and Wales, and they talk about rural, I think of rural being something different to what they do. I think that's why regional statistics is so important. You'll see some other figures in there. Life expectancy. Scotland, we're always compared in our newspapers. They always say how bad Scotland is. I think our newspapers have a bet on how many times they can find Scotland's the bottom of the pile. And I'm sure every national newspaper in every country tries to do that at some point. It sells papers. But we really do have quite a poor life expectancy in comparison to the rest of the UK and in comparison to the rest of the EU. I'll come on and talk about just the inequality of life expectancy as well in Scotland. But in broad terms, we are similar in many other ways. Roland went through just some of the history of how the regionalisation in Belgium has happened and how statistics have been developed. Within Scotland, we are constantly working on a changing landscape as well. If we go back to 1997, which was the original devolution referendum, that was under the Tony Blair Labour government at the time, just after they came into power. Scotland then got devolved powers. That was then in a new parliament. As the Chief Statistician of Scotland, it is my job to primarily look at statistics that are reported to Parliament and to the government that works for that Parliament. Before that, it was the Scottish Office, which was a department of the UK government. But what I'm trying to get across is that we've obviously had quite a lot of change since then as well. So 1997 was the big change when devolution came in. We've then had the independence referendum in Scotland, which was quite close run, 55 to 45% is not far away. So there was a bit of recognition that Scotland wasn't happy. And then we had the Smith Commission came out of that. So new powers, new taxation, new tax and spend powers came in as a result of that. And then we've obviously had exit from the European Union as well, which has had its own challenges as well. There's been repatriation of some powers. There's a bit of political debate about how much of those powers have actually been devolved back to Scotland and not. On the whole, they have. There's maybe some side issues that are worth arguing about, but on the whole, things like agriculture, forestry and fisheries. Fisheries is probably the most contested area of where devolution comes in there. But in terms of agriculture, that's got a big challenge. We now have to replace the common agricultural policy. We're also now taking on environmental policy as well. Most of the other things on that list there that are matters have been devolved for quite a while in Scotland as well. If you know, Scotland's got a different legal system to England, so that almost sets a precedent for why things are different. We have different legal judgments on things like freedom of information and things like that. So the challenges are, how are we going to work with change? And the data and analysis at the centre of new policy making and new powers that are coming in, most recently around about welfare spending, and at the moment disability benefits have now been devolved to Scotland. And how do we support a better lived experiences for people in Scotland? So we work within the UK system. and UK system. So we've got what is called the Government Statistical Service, and I was talking about this at lunchtime. Quite often there'll be political discourse where our disagreements, and what we always find is that, and I would say on the whole, I've always found this, is that the statisticians keep talking across the whole of the UK. Well, things might not be, and quite clearly at the moment, the elected Scottish government and the elected UK government are almost the polar opposites of each other at the moment. That's quite a challenging environment to work within. But the statisticians, we work very closely across the board. We work closely with our colleagues in the Office for National Statistics, within the Department for Work and Pensions, and HM Revenue and Customs, who are the main UK providers of official statistics in Scotland. But you can see that with the Scottish Government, we're not just the only player in this market. We need to work with a lot of different organisations who are producing official statistics and are generally all reporting to either a Scottish Parliament committee, to Scottish Government, to their own boards. And how do we make that work? I'll just skip on this one. So the role that we play in the Office of Chief Statistician, so I head up obviously the Office of the Chief Statistician, being the Chief Statistician. It's quite a small team, but we work with a lot of colleagues across the piece as well. And so I sit within what's called the Digital Directorate. So that is the director that is providing all digital services to Scottish Government. And within that, we then have a data policy team. They sit alongside us. So the Office of Chief Statistician, data policy, we all kind of work together. And we're all working on these matters here around about data protection, data intelligence network, data ethics, and AI. The AI strategy is quite a very good example of where we've actually come together across a number of the organisations that I just highlighted up here, where we've worked very closely with them. And as a digital directorate, we have now published an AI strategy, which I think really talks to what everybody is trying to achieve. And that's where I see my role in propelling it forward next. How can we actually make delivery on AI? And how do we make delivery on things like machine learning and in that space around about using the data that is potentially not ours, so it's potentially private sector data, as Roland talked about this morning. Now, the reason that this slide is up here and the reason I'm skirting around it a little bit is because Roger would have started talking very much about data linkage here, and this is not my area of expertise. But I'll point to this box down the bottom here, ADR Scotland. ADR is Administrative Data Research. I'm the co-director of this organisation as part of my role as Chief Statistician. And it really is quite a successful organisation in bringing together researchers from academic institutes using public data. And the role that we need to play there is to really join up how academics access the public data. And quite often that data is not produced from Scotland. As I showed you in the slide before, some of that comes from the UK government as well. If we go up to the top right there, second from the end, Research Data Scotland. So this is the organisation that Roger Halliday has gone on to set up. And what Research Data Scotland, I'm going to skip around here a wee bit. I'll go on to there we go, Research Data Scotland. So what Research Data Scotland are trying to do is really enable that to happen. So to enable data in Scotland to be systematically used for research that improves public health, well-being and inequalities. So basically putting in place all the infrastructure that allows researchers to get access to public data and to be able to link it together. At the moment, they are talking very much about how are they going to digest data that comes in from public organisations. And that process also involves working with data officers from each of those organisations and putting in place all the legal agreements. Oh, that's the end of the code. I'll go back a wee second. think we've got a problem in the middle here, not just at the lectern. So as I said, what we've tried to do is we've put in, I thought there was another slide. Have I? Okay, I'm going to talk to this slide a wee second here. I think I haven't got the quite the right presentation up that I thought we had. What we've done over the past 12 or 13 years is really put in place all that infrastructure to allow the data admin to work. But before that, what we were also doing in terms of the regional, looking at Scotland's output and the benefits to people in Scotland, we had, and it's a very small picture in the middle of that tree on the right-hand side, is a national performance framework. The National Performance Framework is an excellent example of where we have had to work together regionally, where we've had to work across the rest of the UK to bring data together, which, and the colours probably look very similar to the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, we've been bringing, this was developed back in 2000, I think it was 2008. And there are a number of metrics on there. I had hoped that there was going to be a slide there and there was going to be a QR code and you'd all be pointing your phones at this just now going, oh, look how fantastic that is. You'll just need to trust me. It's fantastic. But that really is the collaborative effort in a nutshell. And it was a start, I think it was the strongest example back from the noughties, 2000s, where that collaboration worked well. And the National Performance Framework has now developed into what is the metric that everybody, all the public agencies that I showed you on the slide before with everybody's emblems, everybody is working towards the National Performance Framework. The point of doing that is that regionally we can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals as well, because there is a natural pathway from that. And I was noticing in Roland's presentation as well, I think it was one of the in the slides that they gave out, is Belgium going to meet the Sustainable Development Goals? We're also looking at that from a regional perspective as well in Scotland. How am I doing for time? I think I'm probably getting quite close to time, so I'll just start to wrap up. Come back to this one here. So the last thing that I'll say is that as Chief Statistician, my role in Scotland is to promote the data strategy and to promote the ethics of official statistics. And so of all the organisations that you see across there, we had a meeting last Tuesday with all those organisations where all the statisticians were invited to come along and speak to us. And what we are trying to do is put out a programme of learning and development to help improve the trustworthiness of that data. What today has been a wake-up call for me today is just how we need to actually do that linkage up. I don't need to just do that down the way. And I think the two arrows on Roland's slide was an excellent example of that, where actually we need to work up the way as well. And we need to work as regional producers of official statistics as well and learn from that. But the core themes, so the national data sets around about vital events, census, equalities, business register, property ownership, land use, universal services. Those core national data sets are the ones that we're trying to link up. And we're trying to get new insights from linking them up with other administrative data in Scotland. And that's the role that Research Data Scotland would come back to play as well. And we're hoping that by linking up, we'll be able to tell something at a regional level around about equalities, vulnerable people, and inclusive growth. We have, as I said at the start, there's a lot of newspapers who like to tell you that Scotland's the worst country in the planet. Our national newspapers, I think they revel in doing this sometimes, but quite often they do hit the nail on the head. And on the column on the right there, you'll see some points there around about drug misuse, and drug deaths in particular has been a massive problem in Scotland. And what we're hoping is that by getting the linked data sets, we'll be able to start to tease out some of the very hard to find nuanced issues that surround drug deaths and how we can prevent that in the future. I'm going to wrap up there. As I said, I do apologise. It's a bit of a rambled presentation because I was trying to learn this on the flight over last night. But I hope what you get is a sense of the fact that what we're trying to do in Scotland is we're trying to do something akin to what national producers of statistics are doing, but at that regional level and working within the regional the environment. And I don't think that's dissimilar to anything that I've heard here today. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to take any questions. And if I could just ask, if you do have any questions for myself or any of the other speakers, if you could just hold the microphone up just so that people can hear online, and when this goes on YouTube, you'll be able to see yourself or at least hear yourself in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick Christine, Statistics Belgium. Thank you for the interesting presentation. I don't think it was rambled. I know the word of rambledex, if I'm not mistaken, but it was not rambled anyway. I just have a question on the ADR thing. So is it like, is it part of Statistics Scotland, or is it autonomous? How is it? Thank you.
Sorry, I should have covered that. This is where it was rambling, so apologies. So ADR Scotland is part of the a larger UK network of administrative data research. So there's ADR Wales, there's ADR in Northern Ireland as well, and then there's ADR Scotland. There's ADR UK, and then there's ADR England. I'll gloss over ADR England because it's a slightly different setup. But what ADR Scotland is trying to do is link up the professionals within Scottish Government and with the data with the researchers. And that's the main ambition of what we're trying to do. What we want to do is provide those linked data sets. So when I talk about the drugs deaths, be able to link core questions to the census population, to be able to link that to education, administrative data as well, so that we can get further insights there. So the role of ADR Scotland, and that I've got a team within Scottish Government who are trying to do this, the role of ADR is to facilitate that data linkage. Generally what they're trying to do is overcome the legalities and create the spines that would then go on to allow the linkages to happen, and the infrastructure to allow that safe research to happen as well, because we realise the ethics around about or the security around about data linkage is really important. And so again, ADR Scotland plays a role in that. Does that help answer the question? If you come back to me and ask, if you want to drop me an email in a month's time, I should know the answer to that much better and more succinctly. But thank you. Okay, excellent. Just one question. I got away with that. Okay. Well, look, thanks very much, folks, for listening to me. We'll move on to the next talk. And I'm just trying to work out who that next talk is. And I should have a sheet of paper here that tells me. And I've got too many sheets of paper now, so give me a second. It's Johan. So thanks, Johan's going to come up. Johan has worked for almost 30 years for Statistics Netherlands. He's currently working on cross-border statistics. He was talking to me at lunchtime about it, and it sounds very interesting. But before that, from 2009 to 13, he was seconded to as a national expert to labour market unit of Eurostat, but he's now leading a project to implement the production of cross-border labour market information for the Dutch border regions. In addition, he is also involved in the process of building evidence for the EU border regions. And it's in that context that he's leading the consortium of statistical offices that carries out the pilot project to develop methodology, cross-border information. As mentioned in point 3.10.1, if there is an upside to leaving the EU, it's that I don't have to remember long numbers like these again. We generally use letters in the UK, but that's a slight downside. Anyway, on building evidence in the EC communications. So, Johan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. My presentation. Should it work like this? No. Oh, nice map of Scotland. And oh well, here. Oh, sorry, here. Oh.
Yeah, just leave this one up. Sorry. Thanks, Johan. This is great. This is statistics. Statistics improv. You couldn't find a better comedy show here. Get your phones out. I'm very proud of this one. I'm going to leave this one up here for a second, but do get your phones out and go on to this one here. This is from my previous role, and Roger was going to talk about it, and he's been doing this quite a bit. This is a crop map, and this is about the future that I want to take the stats community into next as well. This is a crop map using Sentinel data from the Copernicus space program. Sorry, Johan, I'm eating into your time, so I will make this quick, I promise. But what we've done is basically we've taken radar images of all fields across Scotland, and we do field inspections from agriculture, and using a training data set of 1,000 fields, we have been able to predict nearly all 480,000 fields in Scotland, what crops are growing in there. It's a fantastic project. It was developed using agile production methods and some of the things that Paul was talking around about the modernization of statistics. It's a fantastic product that was released as experimental statistics in 2021. If you are interested in that or you want to share that with your colleagues, I'd be more than happy to put you in touch with the team there. And without further ado, Johan, thank you.
Okay, now it's my time, Ali. Am I allowed? Okay, yeah. So hurry up. My name is Johan Van der Valk of Statistics Netherlands, and I will talk about cooperation with the statistical office across the border, Germany. With my intention was to have a talk together with my colleague Wolfgang Seifert. Unfortunately, he was not available for today. So I will give the presentation, but we prepared the presentation together. And more similar to Ali, I modified it a bit, but in principle, it's the presentation we made together. I will also talk about other border regions than Germany, but I will come back to that later. So I started working about 5 years ago on trying to set up cross-border statistics. And the question people always ask me, why don't we have this data? Well, you have European Union data, so that is international coordinated, but that has a very low regional detail. And you have national data in every country, but that is not internationally harmonized. So the idea is the only way to get regional data comparable across the border is that you cooperate with the statistical organization across the border. And that is nice about talking about this because a lot of Belgian people are here. Germany is also a federal state. So in Germany, you have member states, so Bundesländer, and they have all their own statistical office. And you have a federal statistical office similar to the situation in Belgium. And the federal statistical office sends all the data to Eurostat. So that this is typically the European data. But the Bundesländer, statistical officers of the Bundesländer, they are responsible for the regional data of their member state. So if you want to have a cooperation to establish cross-border data, you need to have cooperation with the statistical office, in our case, of North Rhine-Westphalia and Lower Saxony. But we had no contacts with them at all. We only had contacts with the federal office. So I started we approached them and we said let's see if we could work together. And the best way to work together to start this relationship is to do a joint project, and that is what we did. And so we first did a sort of pilot, and that was quite that felt nice. And then we said, okay, let's make it a more stable product, and that we carried out with using European subsidies on labor market on cross-border cooperation, Interreg. And we had this project where we focused on labor market data for the 3 countries involved. Yes, so as I talked to you, so this is the Netherlands, this is North Rhine-Westphalia with this information technique, IT&LA, is Statistical Office of North Rhine-Westphalia, and Landschoot for Statistics Niedersachsen is the Statistical Office of Niedersachsen. And we together, we started a project to establish open data for all the regions here, labor market data for all the regions that are here on this picture. The idea was to have to have comparable data on the labor market and also linked themes that are linked, so like demographic, qualification, and economy, and have time series and the lowest regional detail if possible. In the end, we had some data on municipalities, but most of the data is on NUTS 3 level, which is already more detailed than you can find at the database of Eurostat, because most of the data is on NUTS 2 level for Germany. But since we have the data in-house, so we were able to deliver more detail. The product we realized was this internet portal with open data. We host it as Statistics Netherlands. There's a link here. So this is the open data that we collected together and is put here. And as you can see, this is the Dutch version, but we also developed a German version where we use the infrastructure we already have at Statistics Netherlands to share open data. And for this site, this is sort of adapted site. We misuse the possibility to have an English version, and we use it to have the German version. But so this is this open data portal with these indicators, and you can select tables. And the nice thing is that it's also possible to download the data. And that is especially important for regional data, because you could see, I will go back to be a bit in line with what the way Ali presented to be more uniform system. If you have all the regions here, there are so many regions that on a table you cannot you cannot make real data, but you can select the regions you are interested in, of course, and then you have a smaller table. But in fact, the data is open data. It's mainly used to download, I would say. Also, one of the things that we did not, what we do, we included all regions. So as you can see, you can say, well, these regions here in Lower Saxony, they are not bordering with the Netherlands, so why include them? Maybe even these at the east, and you can see these regions. Well, you can also debate, but the idea is let's include all the regions, and then you can decide. Every user can decide for themselves what they call border regions, and that is the nice thing about statistics. You can deliver more data in such a way that all kinds of users can use it. I will go a bit faster. So these are some of the data sets. Wolfgang included quite a lot of these numbers. I will not go into detail with them. So we have commuters. This was a new indicator which was not available at all. So this was one of the indicators we developed ourselves, the number of cross-border commuters. And as you can see, most of the commuters, they commute from the Netherlands to Germany and not to the other way around. There's also this interesting thing we invented. We selected border regions and near border regions. I just told you that we did not. I can see. Well, let's go here. Yeah. So in our open database, all the regions are there. But we also use the labor force survey for labor market data. This is a survey, and then it is impossible to have to identify all the regions, and therefore we selected what we call the border regions, which are the next three regions directly to the border, and the near to the border regions is just one layer further. This was just to show some outputs. I did the same exercise. Before I forget, I did the same exercise for Belgium, and then if you take all the borders, then every region in Belgium is either a border region or a close to the border region. So I think to have this kind of data makes sense for Belgium as well. So this is the bridge to, well, yes, this is important, but we also carried out another project with Belgium, where we have included the data for Belgium as well. So this portal that I mentioned, it's not only the data of Germany and Neder-Saxon, North Rhine-Westphalia, and the Netherlands, but it also includes Belgium. So Flanders and Walloon. This project we carried out, we finished this last year with Steunpuntwerk, which is part of the Statistics Flanders community. And here are some nice outputs we produced on commuting in the Belgium case. These are the regions with the highest, with the share of cross-border commuting. And for Belgium, because it's most familiar to it's Zeeuws-Vlaanderen and Zuid-Limburg, where the most commuting takes place. And these are, to a high extent, in Limburg, to a high extent, also Dutch people that live in Belgium. In Flanders, so to say, and work in the Netherlands. While in Zeeuws-Vlaanderen, it's the other way around. These are mainly Belgian people that live in the Netherlands. But of course, it makes sense because of the water. How much time do I have still? Plenty. Okay. Then I want to say this. So as Ali already mentioned, I also have worked for Eurostat. So I was thinking, well, this issue we have here in our lower countries, let's say, including Flanders, it's and part of Germany. It's not something which is unique for us, but it's important that it also is something that is in other regions in Europe an issue, and I strongly urge, or I everywhere where I come, I like to make the point that we should work more on that we should cooperate more. Methods should be harmonized. So for regional data. The method we use to make this data set or this open data system is to make use of the expertise and the data that is already available at the statistical offices, and that's ideal for so that is cost effective. And I think it's very important that we start working on more of this kind of data because we have this now for the Netherlands. You have a few other regions in the Nordic countries also have this kind of data, but for a lot of other countries, this data is not available. And I think it's very important to have this. And I say, well, there's no reason why we should not cooperate. And it's also important, this is also a nice point. So you should stop depicting a country as an island, especially only when a country is an island, but not here in the continent. At the continent, we have border regions. And in the border regions, the situation across the border is sometimes more relevant than situation in the capital. So therefore, even from a national perspective, it's important to look across the border. It's one of the points I like to make. And you cannot rely on Eurostat to do this because they already have of a lot of work on harmonizing data for 28 or 30 countries. If you also they work like this, that they start with national data and try to regionalize this, but for regional data you sometimes need other expertise. So it's important to find a sort of cooperation, and therefore the Germans. Germany is of course a country that borders with a lot of countries. So they think that what we did here in this region is a good example, and they want to like to promote this for other bordering countries as well. Therefore, this federal bureau in Germany has taken the initiative to set up a network cross-border data in order to improve territorial monitoring and facilitate cross-border data and to improve the development. Do I have? Okay, that was it. So it's you can have a look at that website for what this network is done. It consists of a number of countries linked to or bordering Germany and France, and also it both includes data producers and data users. That's also interesting element of this network, but this is on a voluntary basis, and we still have to. We just started working, and we aim to start to work on this more in the future. That's my story.
Yep. Thank you very much, Johan. I've got a few questions that I could ask him. We've got a bit of time, so we might just have a bit of a discussion and carry on what we were talking about, a bit more publicly what we were talking about. But can I ask, is there any questions, first of all? Does anybody want to raise a hand? And if not, I'll just start. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Johan, for your presentation. I'm Wim Raas from OVAM, the Flemish Waste Agency. I was wondering what initiated the project. I didn't really fully understand how did the project come to a start. Like, how did the relationship between the regions originate? Was there like a specific political demand or a question raised by within your agency? And second question was, did you collect specific data that was relevant for the relationship between the countries, or did you just exchange existing data? Was it like an extra collection of data, or was it just exchange? Thank you.
Yeah, so the main purpose was we set up this website in a way that that you include now few data sets, but it's possible to include more data sets. So we thought this was the beginning of a nice process, but the interesting element is that we initiated it ourselves. So there was no government saying you should do this. We were just showing as statistical office what we can do with existing data, and we think that doing this is very useful for a policy, for cross-border policy, or even national or regional policy. The interesting element is that we are still in the Netherlands in the process of finding, because this was a subsidy for this development project, and now it has to stand on its own feet. So we are saying to our ministry, well, this is extra work for us. Please pay us to keep this running. And then it is quite difficult to get the finance for this, because we started this, and they say, well, you started it, so you have to pay for it. But we say, well, we do not make the data for ourselves. It's useful for us. And I think we made a case that it's relevant to you. But okay, this is a difficult process. And the interesting learning point here is that ministries are not used to this initiative of statistical offices. Maybe it's always the other way around. Ministries say they asked the statistical offices, and we say it's too difficult to do. And that is the normal situation. But the other way around, say, well, we can do this. Are you not happy with it? This is new. But well, I hope this is it is appreciated, and we will see. We'll see.
I think that's an excellent mantra for us all to take away, that we stop saying that's too difficult and start doing difficult things, and then people want us to stop doing it. Then you know you've done something right. Can I ask, just as a kind of follow up to that question as well, and I think you're about to touch on it, but and I can see the benefits of doing that. And you know, I was joking earlier on about the EU leaving Europe, but I think sometimes that actually the comparability between the UK and the rest of Europe, there seemed to be some sort of disparity there, and throughout the referendum discussions, that, you know, Europe's got it different to us, and actually the data probably doesn't stack up, and probably there's a question mark there about the statisticians and be able to illuminate some of those differences across borders. But I just wondered, has it led to any policy decision changes, do you think, between Netherlands and Germany or Belgium, or has it led to new initiatives or any other funding decisions yet? And I guess that's the sort of thing that takes time to come through in any case.
Well, yeah, sometimes I think that it's easier for statistical officers to cooperate across the borders than it is for other parties. So ministries, they stop at the border. So they are, my theory, so the answer is no, it has not yet led to major policy issues. What was interesting in Corona times, in COVID times, the border was closed for some time, and so there were several items in the newspapers on how many people commute across the border, where it's an issue. So this was national news, that people were not able to cross the border, and how many people there were. There were even people I was asked how many people work in healthcare and live across the border in Belgium and cannot do the work because they cannot get to the hospital, because this is the case. So it's clearly irrelevant. But the step, so they still have to value this new kind of information, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think you were coming. You started to touch on the next question that I was going to ask, which was around about services. Is there access to services? Because you talked about workers and commuting patterns, but I was wondering if there was service accesses across the. But I think you've started to touch on that, and the fact that people are supporting services across the borders. The
nice thing about this cross-border project is that I also this interesting element that I also made my colleagues within my office aware that there is also a situation across the border. So we have, for instance, this national statistic on how close facilities are
Yep.
But we only make this for using the Dutch data. So in case that you are a border region and there's a hospital just across the border, they say, no, the nearest hospital is 20 kilometers away because this is the national hospital. Yeah. So they now realize that they have to include the data across the border. And I say, well, this is nice. I have contacts at the office in Germany, and they can provide you with this data so you can improve your national statistics.
Thank you. And I think that's a sentiment I would echo from other conversations at lunchtime. Before I let you sit down again, Johan, are there any more questions? Just stick up a hand if you want to ask another question. I'll take that. I know. Can we just get another round of applause for Johan? That was great. Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker, I think I'm going to get this right. Bart, are you speaking next? You are. Excellent. Good. I got that right. Oh, I can use this one here. So we'll welcome Bart up in just a second. So he's worked as a researcher for the University of Antwerp. Can we just actually thank you, Dirk and Dirk? You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you. Just acknowledge that. Yes. You're getting 2 rounds of applause as well, because I'll ask for one at the end as well. Bart's worked for years as a researcher for the University of Antwerp on various topics such as labour market and discrimination, co-housing and energy poverty, which is obviously a topic that is probably quite close to a lot of our minds at the moment. Since 2019, he has been working at Statistics Flanders, where he monitors the import and export of goods and services, as well as the income and expenditure of the police and the fire brigade. So can I ask you to welcome Bart to the stage here?
Thank you, Ali, for the introduction. I have to go to a couple of slides. Okay. So I'd like to tell you something about the regional distribution of the Belgian imports and exports of goods and services. I realize that's quite a long title, a sentence almost, but I hope that during this presentation it will become clear why it couldn't be something more concise like international trade or import and export by region. That would have been shorter indeed, but wouldn't fully cover the content. So I had to use the longer title, which is also the name of the project I want to present to you today. First, I will tell you a little bit about the origins of this project. Then I will explain today's working method. Thereafter, I tell a few words about the relevance of these statistics, and I conclude by showing you some results. Throughout the years, the National Bank of Belgium got several questions that came from members of parliament or employers' organizations, for instance, about missing regional statistics. Therefore, in 2009, the National Bank invited the Belgian regions to collaborate in making additional regional macroeconomic statistics beyond the compulsory Eurostat program. For this purpose, each region delegated a statistician who carried out the additional program, supervised by the National Bank experts. The actual delegated statistician for Flanders is now standing in front of you, but 2 predecessors paved the way for me. Priority was given to 2 themes. First, some additional elements of regional income accounts concerning consumptions and savings. Secondly, the regional exports and import statistics that we are presenting today. Both statistics are according to the European System of National and Regional Accounts, ESA. The ESA is a set of rules, quite stable in time, since we are now using the 2010 guidelines. By working this way, all statistics are compatible with other macroeconomic variables, such as gross domestic product, gross value added, etc. The agreements were made between the 3 regions, but involved also a detail for smaller territorial units, such as the 10 provinces and the 44 districts. For the Dutch-speaking among us, when I talk about districts today, I mean arrondissementen. So they should not be confused with the city districts of Antwerp, for instance. Let's move over to the working method. So for this project, 4 partners are working together: the National Bank and the 3 regional statistics offices. The National Bank owns the basic data, and as mentioned, the regional institutions each delegate 1 person to work on this project. It is important to notice that we only deal with international trade here. Trade between regions is not included in these statistics. So I want to emphasize that the starting point is the Belgian international trade, which is distributed among the regions. So we have to be careful not to speak about a regional trade balance. We can make a subtraction of exports minus imports to achieve net exports, but we cannot call this a regional trade balance. Therefore, we should know interregional flows as well. If that's not clear to you right now, we'll come back to it later with an example. Since we follow the prescriptions of the ESA, we are coherent with aggregates of national and regional accounts. This may imply that we have to make some adjustments or arbitrations in order to reach identical totals of import and export. And as other macroeconomic aggregates as consumption and income, we present our figures in current prices. According to the ESA, exports and imports of goods and services are transactions between residents and non-residents. Please note that it is not important whether a good physically passes a border of a country, but it is crucial that there is a transfer of ownership. An important source for the international transactions are the monthly Intrastat declarations. These are legally mandatory documents that companies have to fill out when their imports and exports are above a certain threshold. This is only applicable when the partner country is from the EU. For extra-state commerce or trade with non-EU countries, we rely on customs documents. Surveys are a basis for service transactions, police reports for smuggling or for drugs traffic, and so on. In this way, for more than 70%, the transactions obtained can be attributed to a specific company. For instance, via a company registration number or BTW number, and thus to 1 region, 1 province, and 1 district, and to a branch of industry. A peculiar treatment exists when a company is active in more than 1 district. Then the values are divided proportionally according to the wages of the employees. And then there are some items for which it is harder or sometimes even impossible to link the transaction directly to a certain company, a region, or a branch of industry. Think about diamonds, gas, electricity, illegal economy, or e-commerce. Therefore, we use partition keys such as added value, intermediate consumption, population numbers, etc. Every year, we strive to give an update in March. So 2 months ago, we published the results for 2018 to 2020. The years before 2080 are considered to be definitive. 2018 and 2019 were revisions, which means that those data years have been published before, but have been subject to adaptations. And 2020 was added for the first time. This means that we have results after 1 year and 3 months, or 15 months in total. This may sound as quite a delay, but 2 years ago, it used to be after 31 months. And unfortunately, these statistics, as most statistics, are not produced in one fell swoop. And particularly in this case, they are at the end of a chain of processes. National accounts have to be ready with their calculations. And all the partition keys from regional accounts and from external sources have to be available. This means the results of 2021, last year, will be published in March of next year. That's the fastest we can deliver it at the moment, though we are constantly trying to shorten the working process. To recapitulate, the details we procure are self-evidently exports and imports, goods and services, a breakdown by region and province and districts, a breakdown by branch of industry, and we are currently working on a detail for products and country of origin or destination, but this is premature to present to you today. A last topic about the working method I wanted to address is about classification details and confidentiality. The table you can see on this document, on this slide, I'm sorry, summarizes the classification details. The A3 classification, for instance, only has 3 categories: agriculture, industry, and service economy. Whereas the A64 on the right end has 64 categories, which I'm not going to sum up right now. When studying the regions, this line, for the goods, the most detailed classification is A64, whereas for the services, which is a smaller set of transactions, we can only use A21. Opposite of that, when observing the districts, say services, only the 3 categories I just mentioned will be visible. This has nothing to do with practical considerations, but everything with confidentiality. So we have to make sure that a company's trade figures cannot be seen by competitors. So for each cross table, we have to check for confidentiality. And this too, of course, slows down the publication process, but it simply cannot be skipped. So basically, it is a trade-off. More geographical details means less information on economic activity and vice versa. Then quickly, some words about the relevance of these statistics and to what purpose they are being used. As been told, the imports and export statistics are coherent with ESA and are an important building block of a regional gross domestic product, besides consumption and investment. The time lag between data year and publication year makes it less useful for short-term business cycle analysis, but it can be used for macroeconomic purposes. Consider the analysis of the openness of an economy, more specific, a subnational economy, and it is an element of the multi-regional input-output table. Furthermore, we do get ad hoc questions of members of parliament, employers' organizations, Flanders Investment and Trade, the Walloon Export Agency, and even the Flemish Institute for Technological Research, VITO, and so on. I'm missing a slide here, but I'll manage. So, Belgian, let me show you some results now. Belgian exports in 2020 were 366 billion euros. Imports were 359 billion. So this means a net surplus or a slightly positive trade balance. This is distributed to the three regions as follows. Flanders accounts for 70%, Wallonia 16%, and Brussels for 14%. Imports yield comparable shares, although Brussels and Wallonia switch places. For Flanders, it's 71%, for Brussels, 16%, and for Wallonia, 13%. I must say, my colleague of Brussels was a bit unhappy about the way how I presented the results. The three-dimensional pie made the share of Flanders look even bigger than it already was, in his opinion. Well, I think he had a point, so especially for him, I made an alternative version, which had suddenly disappeared. This was the slide I was looking for 1 minute ago. Am I going in the wrong direction? There was a mix-up of slides. So this is the alternative version of the Belgian exports. Same figures, different look. Maybe it's a far better way to present it. Anyway. Really something strange happening with the order of the slides. For each region, we can now also calculate net international trade, albeit not a real regional balance, since we do not comprise interregional flows, like I told. Wallonia was the biggest net exporter, with a surplus of 10 billion. Flanders was also slightly positive, with 2 billion on a total of 250. Whereas Brussels showed a slightly net import, but improved its position in the last years. The regions also have their own economic structure. The pies show the share of services in orange and goods in blue. It is striking to see that Brussels generates much more international trade coming from services than their Flemish and Wallonish counterparts. Their exports and imports consist mainly of goods for more than 3/4 or nearly 3/4. I'm looking for a table of exports. Yes. In this table, I put together the top 3 branches of industry for each region. Goods are on the left, services on the right. The designations between brackets are codes in the NAS classification system. I used the finest level we use in our publications. This means A64 for goods and A21 for services. For goods in the 3 regions, the wholesale trade is very important. Additionally, for Brussels, this includes the wholesale and retail trade of motor vehicles. For Flanders, the chemical industry ranks very high. And for Wallonia, the pharma industry. For the services, the picture is more diverse. Manufacturing and transportation in Flanders and in Wallonia. Financial and insurance activities in Brussels and in Wallonia. And professional, scientific and technical activities, especially in Brussels. For completeness, I added up the imports as well, but the same branches of industry show up. Some branches switch places, and Wallonia imports are a considerable amount for the metal industry. This one. But the global picture stays the same. To illustrate a few things geographically, I'd like to present you a series of maps. On this map, you can see the share in percentage of each district in the export of goods and services, in the total exports. Antwerp, Halle-Vilvoorde, and Brussels, capital region, are ranking in the top 3. Also Ghent, Turnhout, and Walloon-Brabant, or Nivelles, if you like, have a considerable share. For your information, I focused on exports in this last slides. Exports usually get more policy attention, and the maps I show you are only meant to be illustrative. But of course, we could do the same for imports as well. Goods are the largest part of total exports. So when we focus on them, we get more or less the same picture as the total exports, albeit less pronounced in Brussels and a little bit higher in Turnhout. When we look at the services, you can see that Brussels is the undisputed #1, followed by Antwerp and Halle-Vilvoorde. Well, it makes it very exciting to look where are the correct slides. Okay. I'll give you 2 more examples. When we focus on the manufacturing of metal, you can see that the exports are more evenly spread around the metal. Okay, I'll skip the card. I'll skip the maps. I'm sorry. But if you like to check the figures behind it, or if you like to make your own selection, just go to our website, stat.nbb.be, and you can try it on yourself. Give it a try. You should select here regional accounts, distribution of Belgian imports and exports, and give it a try. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Well done. You win PowerPoint bingo today. That was an excellent presentation. I thought that was fascinating there. I've got a few questions again, but I'll open up to the floor first.
Thank you for this presentation. It's not my branch of statistics, but I did find it very interesting. And do you have like a contact then with FIT, Flanders Investment and Trade, on all of this? Do you?
We do have regular contacts, yes, but it's not on a systematic basis. But I think 2 months ago we made a presentation for them to show our work, and they had suggestions for us as well. So there is a cooperation, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Bart, we've got a wee bit of time, so I'll just ask you, sorry, that's a very Scottish word. We've got a small amount of time, so I'll ask you a couple of more questions. You talked about having timely data, and obviously that's every statistician's dream, every policymaker's dream. They always want more timely data. Can you think, in developing that more timely data, what was the biggest factor, non-technical factor, in being able to deliver that more timely data?
That's a difficult question because I think they are practically all of it are technical questions. So we have to, all our partition keys have to be ready. And I think for the biggest part, that is a technical issue.
Okay. I wondered about maybe the conversations you had to have with people to make sure that those partition keys, you got access to that data, or you got access to that. I just wondered if, but it sounds like that wasn't so much of an issue. It was the technical part of that was a problem.
Maybe a colleague of mine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Just to answer your question, sir, what Bart presented here are statistics compliant with the ESA framework. So there's a lot of work to make it compliant with the macroeconomic framework. But apart from this, there's also the more business-like statistics that fit users also from National Bank, that are just the monthly data from custom statistics. So you have monthly data from exports and imports according to partner country of origin and according to goods, but not ESA compliant. These are very useful for business cycle analysis, and these exist. So that's not a bunch of statistics. It's not the same as the total. It's not the same as the total Bart has because of the ESA compliance. This is the ownership which dictates. There's a principle here is based on ownership. The principle in the other range is based on the passing goods across frontiers. See, there's a difference. But there is statistics for business cycle analysis much more timely, but not ESA compliance.
Thank you. Thank you. That kind of, yeah. I think the ESA compliance is probably the bit I was missing there. Yeah, I don't like pie charts. If I were your chief statistician, as I said, I would have probably made the same criticism. Just looking at the export-import tables, though, I thought that was quite interesting when where you were looking at what was top ranking within each of the regions. You had, I think you had financial services top for a couple of the regions, Brussels and it wasn't anyway. Was that, and just looking at the maps, which I think are fantastic as well, was this all what you were expecting? Did you expect to see these results, or was there anything that jumped out that was a bit different that you weren't expecting to see?
Well, this is a process that has been going on since 2009. So we are giving a yearly update. So I don't think there were sudden surprises, since it's an evolution actually. Yeah. Okay. But it is interesting to see the differences between the regions, and therefore I think this is valuable, the work we are doing.
No, absolutely. I think so. I wasn't questioning the value of it. I was just wondering whether that was expected or not. I'll pass the microphone back up. No, absolutely.
One thing that really struck me when analyzing that kind of statistics on a longer term version is the growing importance of services in the total amount of goods and services. It's really gradually increasing. That's the most striking point that I can really report. But according to goods, type of goods, it's not really. But the growing importance of services is a striking feature.
Thank you. We've got another question. I would echo, and sometimes being able to evidence what you know is already happening, but to policymakers is sometimes just as important as, you know, new discoveries. Being able to actually state, yes, we know that something is important. So I think that's a good point. Monica.
It's not that much a question, but a surprise to me. When we were developing those statistics, we made the choice of cutting down exports and imports per branch, which is not a common thing to do in imports and exports. They normally cut off by product or by country. But doing so, we saw, for example, that in Wallonia, there was a certain importance in services of financial and insurance activities, which was quite striking, because part of financial and insurance activities as a branch in value added is quite low in Wallonia. And here in exports, it was quite high. So we got a question about that. And when we were examining the detailed information, it is because one firm that is quite important in Wallonia and which main activity is in the financial side, exports products, but products that are relying to computer services. So when you say quite a lot of service exports in Wallonia are coming from the financial activities, it might concern a product that is not a main activity. So I think you should be aware of that difference. And a next project of Bart and Toon will be to go down now in products. So if we would ever be able to combine branches and products, if we do not consider confidentiality, then we might have quite a lot of other surprises, I think.
Do you want to respond?
Okay.
Before you say anything, because that was actually my follow-up question was, or was there one company driving a lot of work in that area? And as you said that, I saw some of your colleagues going, yeah. So you obviously know who that is. But sometimes that's and it was exactly that sort of insight that I was kind of trying to get at, because sometimes when you see these things, you know, it suddenly jumps out, oh, we didn't know that, but not unexpected. Bart,
Well,
do you want to say something else?
Some people are in favor of much more openness about the data, so without confidentiality. For instance, the FIT agency has already uttered their wish that individual companies would be published as well. That would be quite useful information, of course, but not all companies are happy to share that sensitive information. So
and sometimes I guess in this instance, it's probably commercial sensitivity rather than confidentiality, I suppose, isn't it? It's you know something about one company and what they're actually doing, and competitors can then derive something from that. But if you know that already, you maybe don't need to worry about the confidentiality. But that's a debate for another day. Can we just give Bart a round of applause? Thank you very much, Bart. Well done. Okay, we'll move on to our final talk. I'm glad to see you are all still awake, which I think shows what an interesting and stimulating debate it is. So, Lisa, no pressure, but you've got to keep them all awake for the next half hour. Lisa is a demographic analyst at the Flemish Statistical Authority. Her main activities includes the analysis, statistical mapping and forecasting of the population of the Flemish region. Before Lisa worked there, she was at the Vrije University in Brussels as a postdoctoral researcher, and she obtained a PhD in the field of sociology. I'm certainly looking forward to this. I got a taster of it at lunchtime, so I'll welcome Lisa up to the lectern.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm a bit afraid of what's coming up. So there's a lot of slides, not mine. It's okay. Okay, no, no, it's not my slide. I'm going forward, right? Oh, yeah. Not me. Yeah. No, that's not the beginning. Yeah, that's not the beginning. Okay, so thank you. Welcome. If the PowerPoint allows me, we'll talk about interregional cooperation for official demographic statistics. I would like to thank the different authors. So we have Patrick Luzin from Stadbel, Marie van Dresse from the Federal Planning Bureau, Jean-Pierre Hermia from BISA, and Jan Pickeri from Statistics Flanders. Because they provided the input for this presentation. So this presentation in itself is already a collaboration. Okay, when I talk about interregional cooperation, I'm talking about a collaboration between these regional and federal institutes, and more particularly about a collaboration between those who are working on demographic-related aspects within each of these institutes. So we have Statistic Belgium or Stadbel, we have the Federal Planning Bureau, we have for the Walloon region EWEPS, for the Brussels Capital region we have BISA, who's part of Perspective Brussels, and for the Flemish region we have Statistic Flanders. Today I would like to present 4 different topics, all illustrating some kind of collaborations. So I would like to start with the Demobel data from Stadbel. Then there's this research report on migrations between the 3 Belgian regions. There's a demographic outlook of the Federal Planning Bureau, and I would like to end this presentation by saying something about the process of creating a new official statistic on step families. So let's start with the Demobel data from Stadbel. So Demobel, harnessing data opportunities beyond the data. Demobel is the demographic database of Statistic Belgium, of Stadbel, and it is the central data pillar for all the demographic data in Belgium. It contains the demographic information coming from the National Register, and it is enriched by Stadbel with other micro data. It is updated every year, and it has a structural and a dynamic component. So the structural component is also known as the stock database. This provides information about the entire Belgian population for the 1st of January of each year. And it includes variables or information on, for instance, the age of the individual, the sex of the individual, and the nationality of the individual. There are many other variables in this database. And then we have a structural, a dynamic component, and it's also known as the flow database. And this database consists in all the events happening during 1 year. So for instance, all the births, all the deaths, and all the migrations. The Demobel data is quite innovative, as before 2010, even Stadbel had no direct access to the National Register. So also they only had the aggregated data, and it's only after 2010 that they are granted a direct access to the National Register. And obviously this created new opportunities and possibilities of collaboration. Demobel can be considered as a 3-layer model, or there's a 3-layer approach. In the first layer, so the first layer consists all this demographic data from the National Register. So, and it is the yearly stock and flow of the population since 1990. Then in the second layer, data is added or linked to the first layer. So information coming from other data sources, like information on the educational level of the individual, labor market position, or income, are included in this Demobel data. As well as some second order variables, like everything or all the information on the households and geolocations. And then the third layer, so in the third layer, Statbel creates custom-made database designs, like longitudinal databases, in order to meet specific research requests. So how do we collaborate? How do we, for instance, contribute to the optimization of this Demobel data? Or, well, like Roland already said this morning, we have this Interfederal Institute for Statistics, EES. EES has several service level agreements, SLAs, and there's one on demographic issues. I'm going to call it Workgroup Demography. And it is in this work group that we discuss possible collaborations, or for instance, it's also in this work group that we develop, for instance, a new statistic. So for the time being, we are in the process of creating a new official statistic called step families. So the main idea or philosophy is that we have one central data pillar, and that we are all using this data, we are all using this Demobel data, but it's not only Statbel who gives and the others who receive. No, there's also a mutual cooperation between the different regional institutes or the different statistical institutes. And this is particularly important in a country with several governments. That brings me to my second example of collaboration. In 2017, 2018, I'm not sure, BISA initiated a collaboration with the two other regional institutes, so with Statistics Flanders and EWEBS, to analyze the migration flows between the three Belgian regions. The main objectives were to update the migration flows with the most recent data. So it had already been studied before, but the findings were outdated and an update was needed, particularly because it's often mentioned in the media, but they use these outdated findings. A second objective was to increase the knowledge on the subject, as well as to provide some meaningful input for policy support. A collaboration was possible because we have this Demobel data. So the three different regions all have the same or uniform comparable data. We could join the knowledge or a specific knowledge on the subject, and there was a clear division of task. So everyone who was involved was also responsible. Sorry, that's not the next slide. Okay. The dance begin. Okay. I think this is the next one. So they analyzed the migration flows between the Brussels capital region and the Flemish region on the one hand and the Walloon region on the other hand. And they found, for instance, the remaining importance of suburbanization. So people are leaving Brussels, but they're not only migrating to the neighboring municipalities, they are migrating even farther away. This is not good. Another analysis was on the migration between the Flemish region and the Walloon region. And a quite new approach was the focus on the border between the two regions. And one finding was from 2015, 2016, there was an increased migration from the Walloon region to the Flemish region, particularly from small rural municipalities in the Walloon region. And this was due to the asylum center located in these municipalities. So once people got their permit, they decided to move to the Flemish region and often went to, for instance, Antwerp and Ghent. Okay. The others have many other interesting things, so I would like to invite you to read this research report. It is available both in Dutch as in French. And then we have to say something about the demographic outlook, so I'm just gonna try to find the first slide. I'm going to start here. A third example is the demographic outlook. It is published by the Federal Planning Bureau in collaboration with Stadbel. It happens every year, so there's an annual update. And the methods used to calculate the mortality, fertility, international and internal migration are developed by the Federal Planning Bureau, but the methodologies are frequently presented to and discussed with experts from universities and the other statistical institutes. Okay, and each year, prior to the publication, they organize this meeting with all the different statistical institutes where they present their used assumptions, where they present their preliminary findings. And it's during this meeting that we discuss their results and that we can provide some feedback. I will try to remember the order of the slides. Okay, so there are many or different phases in the development of the demographic outlook. And depending on where we are in time, the contribution or the input of the different institutes differs. So in the first half of the year, it is Stadbel who collects and prepares all the data. In the second half of the year, it's a Federal Planning Bureau who updates their methods, their assumptions, and their projection model. And then by the end of the year, they organize this meeting where they present their findings and where we can discuss everything. We can provide some feedback, and if needed, they make some small or some final adjustments before the publication. And the publication is in the beginning of the next year, so by January or February, they publish their final results together with Stadbel. Okay. Not only do the regional institutes have the possibility to provide or to give some input for the national population outlook, the final outcome of the national population outlook is also used as input for the regional outlooks. So, for instance, Statistics Flanders uses the same assumptions regarding the international and internal migration for the Flemish projection model. The Walloon population projection at the municipality level are calibrated on the population projection of the Federal Planning Bureau, so that's at the district level, and the population projection of the Brussels Capital Region is decomposed in order to obtain a projection at the municipality level. So there is some consistency between the national population outlook and the regional outlooks. Moreover, I've already mentioned this research report. So this report on migrations between the 3 Belgian regions, and this increased migration from the Walloon region to the Flemish region. Well, the Federal Planning Bureau used this insight as input for their assumptions on internal migration. As it was only a temporary increase, they decided not to take into account these migrations in their projection model. And that brings me to my final example of collaboration. That's on the development of an official statistic on step families. So interest in step families has increased in the past few years, not only by the statistical institutes, but also by universities and the public. So questions like how many step families are there in Belgium? How many children grow up in a step family are frequently asked. But up until now, there are no official statistics on the subject, and there are no recurring statistics based on register data on the subject. So the work group Demography is now in the process of creating a new official statistic on step families. Sorry. Okay, I'm lost. Yes, I think this is the next one. All right. So I remember we have this Interfederal Institute for Statistics. We have this several service level agreements. There's one on demographic issues. So we have this work group, the work group Demography. What was the direct cost to elaborate on step families in this work group? Well, Eurostat obligated all their member states to develop a more detailed statistic on household. And to meet this requirement, Stadbel developed a new algorithm. And for this algorithm, more detailed information was needed and became available. So for now we have information on the parentage, which means that for every individual, we know who the parents are. Obviously, this is ideal material to produce statistics on step families, and Stadbel already tried several personalizations to see the different possibilities. So all this led to more in-depth discussions. Okay. I don't know the next slide. Okay, I'm gonna. Basically, to understand what already exists, Statistics Flanders gave a presentation in this work group Demography on how other officials, institutes are analyzing step families based on register data. And it became clear that everyone uses another definition and that everyone uses a different operationalization. So there are many issues that needs to be tackled. For instance, which definition are we going to use? Will we use a perspective of the person or of the household? How will we handle missing information on parentage, and what is the desired output? And it became clear that we needed more expertise on the subject. So we, all the partners of the EES, nominated some external experts. And we are now in the process of discussing all these different issues in what we will call the SLA Workgroup Plus. We haven't reached the consensus yet, but there's a large agreement on subject of discussion and on the next step. And we did agree that we need a uniform statistic on the number of step families, as well as on the number of children growing up in step families for Belgium as for the 3 regions. And hopefully this information becomes available next year or maybe into 2024. So to sum up, I've tried to present 4 different topics illustrating different kinds of collaboration between the federal and the regional institutes. And I hope that these examples made it clear that we do collaborate, but that the input differs depending on the subject. And I would like to thank you for your attention. And I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Lisa. That was fantastic. As a stepfather and having lived with my partner for 15 years and brought up stepchildren, I think this is really high quality. I think it's an overlooked problem in society. And I really look forward to seeing what comes out, because I think step families And as a parent of a step family, you come up against different issues than you would do if they were naturally your own children there. And having brought together my children and my partner's children together, I think this will help policy making in the future. So I'll look out for that. I think it's fantastic. I think we can all agree Statistics Flanders has done a great job of bringing us together into a venue, but done a really bad job of putting our PowerPoint presentations together. So there's some constructive feedback there. We'll see what happens next time. Any questions for Lisa? Well, you know now I've been thinking of a few questions, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I was going to ask, what was the impetus for doing this? Why did you start doing this? But you then talked about Eurostat wanting to do it. So my kind of question after that is, why did you select step families as being the most critical thing to do? Was it obvious?
I will try to answer, but the authors of the presentation are present, so maybe they can help.
You can nominate somebody to answer for you, and I will take the microphone up to them.
And I would be happy to nominate Martine, which is a former colleague, but she's retired now for a few months, so it's hard to pass by again the question. But I think the main reason was also mentioned by Lisa, that we have a kind of a help desk where people can ask questions, and that's a question which is really coming back. I will not say every week and not even every month, but several times a year. Of researchers from universities, and they say we need more official data on step families, because we have those households typologies which in a way all stem from the idea that we have classic families and they are outdated, and we cannot work with those typologies anymore. And that's one issue. And the other issue is that, well, we are not the only institute working on it or interested in it. There are, like Lisa also mentioned, other institutes like the Netherlands have published some work on it. In France, ANC has also published a statistic, but it's all work in progress. There's no recurring statistics on subject. But when StatBel did that very good work on making a new algorithm with a lot of information becoming available, I think it was more or less logical that the first idea was, well, that's perfect or ideal material just to go into that theme of the step families.
I think Patrick would like to add something.
Thank you, Jan. I think that was a fantastic answer. I just as I travel across this site here, I recognise that. I think your point there about we've moved away from the classic family setup, the classic household, you know, 2 parents, 2, 3 children, 1 children. There are more and more, and certainly within my group of friends in the UK, you know, I know plenty. I mean, there is a big enough issue that we definitely need to shine a spotlight on that in terms of demographics. So when I get back to Scotland, I'm going to be telling people about this presentation. Sorry, your name is Patrick.
So just maybe to add something to what Jan said, and I think that's important, is that we decided it bottom up, not top bottom. So it really was decided between experts that this was a team that we need to address after, well, we developed a number of things that made it possible to now produce statistics on step families. So that's also, I think a very explicit example of this collaboration that we have now. If you find each other between experts, a lot is possible, of course.
Yeah, I can't remember if I presented the slide or not, but definitely it was in my presentation to mention the collaboration. Yeah, so thank you.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. Any more questions? Now, we're all statisticians, so I know what statisticians are like. There will be people that wish they'd put their hand up. Now's the time to put your hand up and ask a question if you want to, before we finish up.
Or we can have a drink.
or we can have a drink. I think
That's
I
also
saw a
fine.
half hand go up. Did you? I'm looking. Do you? Yeah. No. I thought you were putting your half. Okay.
So
You did have a question. I wondered if he was wanting to lead us to the bar. I thought that's what. Here we go. Christoph.
During this day, we have had a lot of example of good collaboration. My question was, is there example of collaboration working not so good at all, or is there difficulties in some collaboration for making statistics?
I don't think we've got a long enough conference for the answer to that one.
so I can to answer this question, right?
You I mean, I'll talk about my own experience. I was being very polite, and this is getting recorded, put on YouTube. So this is not my personal opinion. I'm talking on behalf of the Scottish government. So you have to watch what you say, and everything in Scotland is pretty much political at the moment. Since the independence referendum, it really has become quite polarised. Not only that, we've obviously had the EU exit referendum as well. It becomes polarised. My experience is the collaboration works well when people forget the politics and just work across the boundaries. When people start bringing the politics back in, or start to think that they need to work to the politics of a specific department or a specific entity, or bring their own politics to it, that's where I find it most difficult. Some of the most constructive conversations I have had and we've missed them when we've had coronavirus, is being able to get to know people and get through to them that you don't care about their politics, you don't care about what their opinions are, or the opinions of their ministers or the departments. And I see those collaborations working quite well. That's my own experience. But it continues to be a challenge. And I'm sure there are other examples around the room, but I could talk quite a lot about that, not on YouTube. In the bar afterwards. Any final questions then? Oh, one more.
Maybe just to add something on a very pertinent question, I think, of course. I think that where it doesn't work is that we don't have collaboration enough, actually. So the fragmentation has overshoots, actually, and that's a real issue. We at Statistics Belgium, we need help, of course. And we have to see how we organize this. And my goal, for example, in the direction of you, so the regional statisticians, the colleagues here, helping us with development really in the data, which isn't the case yet. So we're looking at that. But that's really something that we have to do. So we have to overcome, actually, the fragmentation that we see in our country, of course, because of our political structure, which has advantages but also disadvantages. So we really need to overcome this, I think.
I'll bring Johan in because he's got a bit of a... Right, we'll take this point and then we'll come up to you afterwards. And then I think this is a good point to leave it and go and have a discussion about this later, because I think this is really good. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts of why we're here. Johan.
Yeah, these are examples of good collaboration. But one thing you have to remember, it's quite hard work. You really have to cooperate for a longer period. You will not succeed in a few weeks. So it's a matter of several years working closely together, and you have ups and downs. And after these ups and downs, and you have realized the product, afterwards you have established a relationship where you can build on. And I think there are much more opportunities to collaborate on all layers. So within the country, between countries, and also within offices. Since I work at a large office, it's even a challenge to cooperate within the office sometimes, and because mainly the statisticians work in silos, but it's important to break down these silos and to cooperate more.
I think I agree with that. And just to come back to Patrick's point as well, where you talked about bottom up, I think that's an important key aspect to it. Ingrid.
I just wanted to add to what Patrick said, and actually also Johan. Well, these are examples of good cooperation, maybe, but they still are ad hoc. When we meet each other, when we have an idea well, maybe when we go for a drink, we get together and we try to make this idea come true. Even if we work in the working groups afterwards, which is official, afterwards it's still trying to find the time to do the collaboration next to the things that we do. And actually there is no, there should be more emphasis on durable and institutionalized cooperation. And I think that was what Patrick was adding or aiming to also.
Thank you, Ingrid. And yeah, I think as a chief statistician in the Scottish Government, maybe that's something I should take away and think about. How do we prioritise the time within the stats group to make that time to do collaboration? Can I thank Lisa once again? So thank you very much, Lisa. And once again, we'll thank the two Dirks in the middle there who have done a fantastic job. And I think we're meeting back over at the other building. Yes, thank you very much for the reception. Thank you very much for the reception and the conversation. Thank you very much.